Hi, my name is Gene Xu. Today I'm going to talk about something that I think most of us regularly encounter, both in our personal lives and in our professional lives. It's basically when we experience any unexpected disappointment in any relationship, in basically any situation. And we actually call this the China leadership dilemma, because the China leadership dilemma is representative of what happens when a lot of foreigners are sent to China. So if you can imagine that you have been selected by your company for an overseas assignment, and you have a list of credentials and successes that you have accumulated over the course of your professional career. And so naturally, when the company is setting up operations in China, they think that you might be a good candidate to lead those initiatives. So the China leadership dilemma manifests itself when your success actually becomes a predictor of failure. Now, it may not be outright failure, and a lot of times it's just outcomes that are lower than what you expected. But basically what happens is when leaders are sent to China, in this case American leaders or foreign leaders are sent to China, because of the vast cultural differences, we end up getting in our own way. So what does that mean? That means that we have this certain level of myopia. We believe certain global best business practices, certain universal values and universal truths should hold true. And we go into China with these perceptions. And what they end up becoming is they become misperceptions. And then a lot of times we also lack awareness. So what does that mean? So we lack self-awareness, which means we don't really understand how other people perceive us, especially foreigners that share a different value system. We lack cultural awareness, which means that even though we've studied a little bit about Chinese culture before we go, and we learn about habits, and we hear about guanxi and all of that stuff, we still don't have the insights to basically be able to put certain situations in the proper cultural context. We also may lack situational awareness. So a lot of times the thinking in China may be short-term, and that's contradictory to a country that has 5,000 years of history, and you think the government has a 10-year plan, so maybe everybody's more focused on long-term solutions, and then suddenly you experience that what people haggle about or what people talk about seems to be very short-term oriented. So suddenly China becomes a land of all of these contradictions, and it doesn't really make sense. So this lack of awareness, this myopia, these perceptions and misperceptions, these all lead to the inability to achieve the outcomes we desire. And over the course of putting together these videos, I'm going to help people understand what are the main CLDs, or China leadership dilemmas, and we're going to provide case studies and insights on why we are our worst enemy when facing these dilemmas. And our success basically impedes our level of open-mindedness, so to speak. And that actually ends up hurting our ability to achieve our long-term objectives. It also hurts different things like strategic decision-making. You know, we make decisions based on what we're accustomed to seeing, and when we're in a foreign business context where the things that we're accustomed to don't apply, then sometimes we end up making decisions that we will later regret. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about. So typically, how does this journey begin? Well, it basically begins with something we call known unknowns. So basically these are things that you know you don't know. So for example, you don't know how to speak Mandarin Chinese. So perhaps you hire a tutor or start taking some language classes, but you do that not expecting to be fluent in Chinese, but you want to start to learn the language just to kind of demonstrate some goodwill. You may also read some books about Chinese culture and doing business in China. You probably would even hire an interpreter So when you have very important events and you want to make sure things are translated properly, you hire an interpreter. And then maybe for the really complex negotiations, you hire a consultant to help you prepare for the negotiations. You may even have a local assistant, and the local assistant does a lot of the translations for you, but sometimes your assistant can also give you local insights on kind of what's going on around you, and a lot of times that can actually be helpful to get some local insights, because basically your assistant should be somebody who is kind of on your side, so to speak. So that's how you begin your journey into China. And then you start meeting people, and generally everybody is super welcome. You're welcome with open arms. Everybody wants to help you succeed. Everybody's got some friendly suggestions on things you should take care of first. Everybody kind of wants you to help you get you set up, make sure you're comfortable, all of these things, and you just feel that China and the people that you're going to be working with are just really, really welcome, and it gives you even more confidence that since you have the support of the company that has sent you there, you have all the technical knowledge, you have all the business knowledge, you understand the products, you understand the markets, that, well, I mean, there's really almost no reason that you might be able to fail. And then what happens is, after the honeymoon period is over, then problems start to pop up on your desk. And usually the problems land on your desk with no solutions. And you start to find that you can't seem to get the explanations or the answers that you're looking for, no matter how hard you try. So you believe that, well, maybe you need more team building, so you have HR initiate more team building activities. You may even hire a consultant in to help you implement new performance management systems to help give the whole business decision-making process more transparency and more accountability. And this process goes on for a while. And then you start to realize that you're still really not achieving the outcomes that you desire. And you also discover that it seems that the more you learn, the further you are away from actually coming up with a solution. And then the blame game starts. And this is natural. Very few people like to blame themselves, so you start to talk about government policies that may be impeding your success. You talk about certain employees or certain partners that kind of aren't living up to their commitments. And over the course of time, you start to think that, well, maybe I didn't know everything that I needed coming in, and then suddenly, as you're making your business plans and you're asking for more money, suddenly you're talking about the hidden costs of doing business in China. If any of this sounds familiar, then more than likely you are experiencing varying degrees of the China leadership dilemma. Okay, and we're going to call these CLDs from now on. So what is the origin of these CLDs, or China leadership dilemmas? So it basically comes from something that Donald Rumsfeld actually popularized when he was trying to explain the current status of America being able to figure out who were the terrorists that were involved in the events of 9/11. And he coined the phrase unknown unknowns. And these are basically things that you do not know, you do not know. And I'm not the first one to actually use this term, so obviously Donald Rumsfeld used it first, but a lot of experts and consultants about doing business in China use unknown unknowns to describe what happens when leaders go to China. And that basically, they don't know what they don't know. And that's what leads to something that we call myopia. It also is basically the source of our lack of awareness. And the question becomes, so we are myopic, and I think everybody by nature is myopic to some degree. Nobody has perfect awareness, so everybody lacks a certain level of awareness. So as leaders and managers, when we go over to China, so how do we overcome these unknown unknowns? So that's kind of what the foundation of what we try to teach and what we try to coach here at EME to solve our China leadership dilemmas. So the rough framework is something like this. So we all have to understand, how do we mature? How do we develop as professionals? We all believe we have an idea, but I have a different kind of proposal. So the framework kind of goes like this. So we all learn from a very early age. We go to school, our parents teach us, and the things that we learn go into kind of one aspect of this framework. And all of our experiences, all of our knowledge, it all goes into this proverbial toolbox of things that we learn. So, for example, you learn how to speak Mandarin Chinese, and suddenly that goes into your toolbox. You can take your Chinese language skills out and basically use them anytime you want. Now, being able to speak Chinese doesn't necessarily mean you know what to say. And generally that is because you lack awareness. And in this analogy, you don't really understand how to use the tools in your toolbox. So on the other side of things that you learn, we have things that you develop. So what are the things that you develop? You develop self-awareness, you develop cultural awareness, you develop situational awareness, and you develop empathy. And that's basically understanding how other people, especially in a cross-cultural context, how they think and how they feel. So with developing a greater level of awareness, suddenly you're better able to understand how to utilize the tools that you have in your toolbox. Okay? So there's also one final component, and this is the most important one. This is something that we call AMA values. So AMA stands for your attitude, your mindset, and your approach. And the thinking is that basically the only thing you can really control is your own attitude, mindset, and approach. And these are the main levers, so to speak, of influencing outcomes. So it's not necessarily directly influencing outcomes, but it's influencing how people perceive you, especially in a cross-cultural context. And when you make adjustments to your AMA values, you can improve how other people perceive you. And basically, this is the foundation of what we try to coach and teach and train, and we help our clients and our students and our members and our followers, we help them on this journey. And this journey is something that we call cross-cultural performance. And it's a journey towards cross-cultural performance mastery. And that basically means it's something that you will, hopefully from now and towards till the end of your career, it will be something that you aspire to master. But you fully acknowledge that you will actually never fully become a master. So it's a continuous development. And this process of becoming a master of cross-cultural performance is how we overcome having things that we don't know when we enter a foreign business environment. And it's especially necessary when Americans or foreigners or Westerners travel to China and try to get things accomplished in China. So at a very basic level, Americans have a tendency to think more linearly. There's a cause and there's an effect, and we're very process oriented. And when we go to China, culturally, Chinese people think more circular or more holistically. So for somebody who thinks in a linear fashion, trying to communicate or negotiate with somebody who thinks holistically or in a more circular manner, this creates a natural source of friction, if not conflict. So this is just kind of an example. And what we're going to do is we're going to share a series of video cases, basically lessons. And basically we're going to offer tips and suggestions for 3 of the major CLDs. So there's almost an infinite number of China leadership dilemmas, but we're going to talk about 3 of the major ones that people encounter the most. And one involves communications, the second one involves leadership, and also one that talks about negotiations. So what are these basically main leadership dilemmas? So for communications, for example, you make suggestions. You think your suggestions are clear, they're rational, they're strategic, but the people that you're communicating with always seem to miss your main point. That's one of the major CLDs. Another one will be on leadership. So what does that mean? That means that you genuinely care about your employees and the people that report to you. So you always try to demonstrate genuine care and general concern. And you try to help them develop as individuals and even as professionals, but somehow the lack of appreciation or even understanding of your goodwill, it just becomes very confusing. That's another CLD. And the third one that we're going to talk about is what everybody encounters all the time, and it's basically negotiations. And what happens is you clearly articulate what your proposals are. You think you've been very fair, you think you've been very generous. However, you seem to not be able to fully reach agreement or alignment. And that's just very perplexing because you're looking for a win-win situation and you seem to be thinking about what all of the other stakeholders should or should not want and should or should not care about. So that's the third major CLD that we're going to be talking about over the course of a series of kind of free video lessons. Basically tips and suggestions and case studies when you encounter these major CLDs. And what I hope is that, I've interested you enough. You kind of realize that sometimes it's not really a matter of what you learn, but it's a matter of what you're able to develop and what adjustments you're able to make. You're able to acknowledge that a lot of times when outcomes don't come out as you want, then the source or the reason is basically yourself. How you performed as a leader, but basically what was your attitude, mindset, and approach in working with all of your other stakeholders and constituencies. So I hope you're interested and you want to join us on this never-ending journey towards cross-cultural performance mastery.